Welcome back for the second portion of Joy in Our Town. Thank you for joining us once again. I'm your host, AC Dunlap, and our guest for this segment is Scott VanderKarr, Director of the Drug Court Advocacy and Reform with the Addicts Parents United. He joins us today to share important information regarding treatment solutions, along with how specialty courts are beneficial to the addict. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you for having me.
How are you?
Doing well today.
Good. I want to start by asking you about your history with the organization.
I was a judge for 20 years. I actually met the Stewarts during their interview. I don't think they mentioned that one of their sons went through one of my programs. Okay. And he's now been successfully clean for 4 years. And so as I looked at leaving the bench to make a bigger impact on society, I knew there were people out there in the community that cared. So we sat down and talked of how we could join forces, because we have a health epidemic that our society hasn't seen before. And just in Ohio, in 2014, 2,482 people died of overdose.
Wow. Wow. So can you talk a little bit about your responsibility within the organization?
I think my first responsibility, and that we discussed, is for me to do what we have accomplished here in Franklin County. We established specialty dockets. Specialty dockets are 2 years long. They help an addict get stabilized away from their drugs and into a safe environment. And we got to the point where we were 70% successful. So my major purpose with the Addicts Parents United is to go out and take that to other counties in Ohio, and then to take that to other states, because you're saving lives when you do that. Then secondary to that, which we've done a lot of, did it last week, got someone into treatment through the Addicts Parents United, is Brendan Mark said they don't give advice, but people will come and say, what do I do? What do I do? Right. And you try to use the network that you are aware of in the treatment field to help individuals find detoxification, to find inpatient treatment, to find long-term care that will help them beat their addiction.
Now, the docket that you created, what kind of motivated you to create that docket as a piece?
Well, we had a mental health court, and I had done the mental health court for years, but I was seeing people with drug addiction not getting the help they needed. The county prosecutor called me and asked me about starting a drug court. I went to my best friend, Judge Herbert, because he wanted to start a human trafficking court. And I said, God just called. Because I knew when the county prosecutor called, that meant we would have the political backing to get a drug court and a human trafficking court started. And that was in January of 2009. By 2010, we had a specific court just for opiate use. Wow. By 2011 and 12, we were running that 4 times a week. We had 120 just in that part of the drug court, 80 in the other part of the drug court, so we had over 200 individuals. Toward the end, between the appropriate drug testing, keeping them accountable by saying, hey, you came in that door, I can take you out that back door. And sometimes at graduation, the person would say, Judge VanderKarr, it was that second time you locked me up that I finally realized I wanted to change my life. But you add that kind of accountability, appropriate drug testing, then Vivitrol came along, and we started using Vivitrol, and that took us up to about 70% success. I see you're writing the word Vivitrol down. The prior treatments were Suboxone and Methadone. Okay. But those are substitutes. An individual, they have a street value because people can still get high. Vivitrol is a once a month injection. Okay. You can't get high of it because it's just the opposite. Mr. Stewart talked on your other segment about the receptors in your brain, and how the receptors work. Well, the Vivitrol blocks the receptors from getting high and receiving the opiate. So they can't get high on an opiate, they can't get drunk on alcohol. So it's a great tool. It also blocks the triggers for them. That was unexpected, but with the number of individuals in our program that went through the program, we found that they didn't have the triggers either. So when we found ourselves at 70% successful, I said to myself, I think I can work with people like the Stewarts and the Addicts Parents United and take this to other communities and let some of my brethren in this community, like Judge Tyack, take the reins here in Franklin County.
Okay. Do you feel that the special dockets that were created have been beneficial to those who are struggling in those areas?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I could bring you in a couple hundred young people that would sit right here in this chair and go, it's what made a difference, because it held me accountable. It showed me people that cared because they had hit the bottom. Family had received so much pain, they started to reject them. And so in a way, the court became their family, their support system for a 2-year period of time and rebuilt their lives.
Okay. Being able to make such an impact in that area, why is now the time where you chose to transition from the judicial system into almost like the community sector?
Because the opiate epidemic wasn't going away.
Okay.
I said 2,482 people died in 2014. Within the next few weeks, the figures will come out for 15. It'll be over 3,000. And then for 2016, we will still have more people overdose in 16 than we did in 15, and more in 15 than we did in 14. Now, there's positive things going on. People are getting very involved in having Narcan with our first responders. And I've seen just in the last 2 weeks a map of the state of Ohio where just so far this year, like 2,300 and some people have been saved by Narcan.
Okay.
Had there not been Narcan, easily 1,500 of those or more would have died. And instead of having 3,000, you'd have almost 5,000 dead. It's horrific. It is a health crisis we need to deal with.
Coming from the judicial system, when would you say you saw heroin use here in Ohio as an epidemic?
Somewhere between 2005 and 2009, right in that time period. I mean, I've got a graph. I don't know if you want to look at it or use it at some point, but you look at that graph, and that graph shows you from the 90s into 2014. But you look at the spike on that, you know, that's a 500% increase over about a 10-year period from around 2000 to 2014.
Wow. What would you say attributed to the increase in heroin use here in Ohio?
You have multiple things, but it starts back in the 80s. Doctors didn't used to ask you what your pain level is. Now, every single time you go in for anything, what's your pain level? 1 to 10. What's your pain level? The pharmaceutical companies convinced the doctors that nobody should have any pain and that opiates needed to be used to control that pain. And so the opiates in pill forms were getting out into our communities, and younger people having sports injuries and getting those, or parents and grandparents having it in their medicine cabinets, not disposing of it, and then the kids getting it out of their kitchen cabinets. Now, Sam Quinones wrote a great book, Dreamland. It talks about how Mexican cartel brings in heroin into the state of Ohio. And kind of at the same time that Ohio realized that, hey, these pain pills, they were starting to be doctors that's all they did is pass out pain pills. They weren't really practicing medicine. And the government started prosecuting them. Well, as the pain pills were being taken off the market, they were costing $30 a pill, and you could get heroin for $10. What are you going to do? You're going to get away from your $30 pill, and you're going to go to the $10 heroin. Now it's getting worse and worse because now they're adding Kentanol and fentanyl to heroin, which makes it that much more lethal. And those are the huge issues where the overdosing with it is just devastating.
It reminds me a little bit of the crack cocaine epidemic, kind of the same thing, even down to the dollar value on the street of what you were talking about. So in your opinion, is there hope? What do people do? Do you see the epidemic of heroin getting any better?
I think it will, but I think it's going to take us another 3 to 5 years. Okay. I could take and draw you a pie, and Mr. Stewart and I have talked multiple times about we can't solve everything, but we can at least speak to it. And you have to draw a pie. When you draw that pie, you've got to talk about our churches. Okay. You've got to talk about our schools. You've got to talk about law enforcement. You've got to talk about the family. You've got to talk about the medical field. And you've got to talk about the judicial system. All of those have to address where we are. The medical field has to look at what they do with opiates and how they're handling that. Law enforcement is, you've got the chief law enforcement person for the state of Ohio going on multiple national TV saying we're not going to arrest our way out of this. You have Gary Moore, the head of the Ohio Department of Corrections, saying, I'm not helping anybody when they're sitting in my prisons. We need treatment. Everybody realizes it. So the first thing you have when you have a problem is people realizing it. We're starting to deal with it. We're starting to see our legislative people take action, but we've got a long way to go.
Sounds like a holistic approach is really what is needed to really combat this problem, along with faith as well.
Absolutely.
From your organization, do you connect with other ones in the community to be able to try and move that issue forward?
Yes, yes. Many of our meetings with the Addicts Parents United will be with multiple other organizations, put on seminars with multiple other organizations, refer back and forth between multiple organizations, both on a national level and on a local level.
So Scott, do you feel that faith plays a role in people in recovery?
Yes, I do. My personal opinion and my personal observations were when I was in the courtroom and even since I've left the courtroom and working out in the community, is that if someone has a tree as a higher power or they have God as a higher power, when they have God and Jesus Christ as a higher power, those are the individuals that I see having a higher percentage chance of making it and succeeding.
So you believe that their relationship with God does help in that progress?
Absolutely. You have to combine it with treatment. You have to combine it with making efforts to work through treatment, so it can't be just the higher power. Right. It has to be a combination of the two.
Okay. And if people wanted to get more information about your organization, where can they go?
The Addicts Parents United does have a website, can also be found on Facebook. Those would be the two places.
Okay. Thank you so much today for joining us and for your time. That is our program. Thank you so much for watching. You can also check us out on Facebook at WSFJ TV 51. Join us again next week at the same time for Joy in Our Town.
This program has been sponsored by the Trinity Broadcasting Network and is made possible by your telethon dollars. Your continual support can keep Joy in Our Town coming to your home every week. Write to Joy in Our Town, 7790 North Central Drive, Lewis Center, Ohio, 43035.